Men, what's a deal breaker even if they are very attractive? Welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Story 1. I met this girl in college. She had a great personality, absolutely stunning, but when I invited her over to my dorm for a Netflix and chill session, I quickly noticed something. How do I put this delicately? She had a serious body odor issue. I'm talking rank. And when she took her shoes off, it was worse than some of the guys I used to play basketball with. Now, I figured maybe it was just a long day, and she hadn't had a chance to shower. It happens to all of us. So, we hung out a few more times, but if anything, it got worse. I tried dropping some subtle hints, and then she told me she was into something called natural hygiene, and only bathed once every couple of weeks and never used deodorant, soap, or shampoo. I'll admit, my body was saying yes, but my nose firmly vetoed the situation. I had to tap out. I mean, she can do whatever she wants, but it's just not my kind of thing. Story 2. If she comes from a deeply religious background, especially one with strong beliefs, like a conservative faith, it's probably best to move on unless you share the same faith. I've been down that road a couple of times, and it's never really worked out. People with very strict religious views can struggle with the idea of dating someone who doesn't share their exact beliefs, and it often leads to tension and misunderstandings. On top of that, their family might be very critical or unaccepting of you because they see things differently. I had an ex-girlfriend who would often tell me how sad it was that we wouldn't be together in the afterlife, because she believed she'd go to heaven and, despite my good qualities, I'd be in hell for not following her faith. That sense of superiority, along with the "I'm better, but I feel sorry for you" attitude, eventually wore thin. Story 3. Any kind of playing hard to get, mind games, or "you need to work for my attention" nonsense is a no-go for me. If you're into me, be straightforward and say it. If you're not, then be honest and say that too. It's really that simple. End of frigging story. I believe most people are advocating for positive femininity, which is something that should definitely be encouraged. However, it's being hijacked by a lot of charlatans telling women things like, "you should be treated like royalty," or "you deserve better," and "the man is always wrong." This kind of messaging often leads to game playing and a sense of entitlement among women. The truth is, you're no different from anyone else. You deserve to be respected and loved simply because you're a human being, not just because you're a woman. At least from my experience, this is what I've observed. Story 4. Social media in relationships is something I can do without. I don't need every detail of our time together splashed across Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat for the world to see. I've always found it exhausting when people feel the need to document every moment of their lives. I once dated a girl for a year who didn't own a smartphone, didn't have internet at home, and didn't even have a TV. At first, it seemed unusual, but it quickly became one of the most refreshing experiences I've had. Without the constant buzz of notifications and the pressure to share every moment online, our time together felt more authentic and meaningful. We could just focus on each other and enjoy the moment without distractions. There was something so honest about it. What we shared was for us, not for an audience. It reminded me that real connection doesn't need to be validated by likes or comments. And honestly, I found it to be one of the most fulfilling relationships I've ever had. Story 5. I once dated a girl in college who broke up with me. Then a few weeks later, she got really angry and flooded my messages because she didn't mean for it to be a real breakup. Apparently, it was just a test to see if I cared enough to fight for her and win her back, and I broke her heart by not doing that when she ended things. Someone had clearly been watching too many rom-coms and quickly learned that real life doesn't work like that. If you break up with someone, don't be surprised if they do the mature thing, leave it behind, and move on with their life. So, no playing games or testing behavior. Be upfront and straightforward, or I'll assume you're just trying to stir up unnecessary drama. Honesty for honesty. Honesty and trust, without games or manipulation, are essential for any lasting relationship. If you ever have concerns or questions, address them with your partner directly. It'll strengthen your connection and help you both move forward in a better place. Story 6. A major red flag is when someone asks for every little detail about where you've been when you were out without them, like hanging out with friends, and then starts accusing you of cheating. If they get overly defensive and secretive in return, it's a clear sign they might be projecting their own issues and showing signs of dishonesty themselves. Story 7. A major red flag is when someone shows a complete lack of effort in basic tasks, like consistently putting off picking up after themselves, even when it could be done in just a few seconds. This extends to having an inflexible mindset, where they're unwilling to learn new things or see things from other perspectives. They're quick to point out the faults in others but completely blind to their own shortcomings, which creates a one-sided and frustrating dynamic. Story 8. If someone is terrible with finances, that's a major red flag. Money is consistently one of the top 3 reasons for divorce, and it impacts every aspect of life. My brother-in-law married a woman who was always one step away from getting her financial situation together. Well, now he's living with us after his 2-year marriage ended because, as it turns out, people who are irresponsible with money and have no interest in saving rarely change. Story 9. I dated this girl. Let's call her the one that got away. Everything clicked perfectly between us, but there was one issue. During quiet moments, like when we were lying in bed or driving, she absolutely hated silence and would suddenly screech like a dinosaur at the top of her lungs. It always took me by surprise and drove me absolutely crazy. Story 10. The inability to admit when you're wrong is a deal breaker for me. One of the biggest reasons I fell in love with my current girlfriend is because she has the ability to recognize when she's wrong and grow from it. It's been a transformative experience for both of us. I'll never again be in a relationship with someone who doesn't have that quality. After experiencing how much better this relationship is compared to any of my past ones, I just can't imagine going back to anything less. Story 11. If you can't have a civilized argument with them, if small differences at the start of the relationship already turn into screaming, shouting, insulting, etc., just think about how those important discussions later in the relationship will go. Story 12. Seeing how they speak to other people, especially when they aren't around. If they shit-talk their friends when they aren't around, why would you think they wouldn't do that to you as well? Also, if they can't keep a secret. Story 13. Being unable to apologize is a red flag. Everyone makes mistakes. That's normal. Take responsibility, and you'll earn even more respect. But if you just make excuses, that's a deal breaker. Story 14. I've learned to avoid people who disregard my boundaries. I went through that once and won't do it again. I also have no patience for games or indirect communication. If you want something, just say it, because I'm not here to prove myself through hoops. If you don't respect what matters to me, it shows me you're not willing to put in any effort to show you care. I'm not interested in a one-sided relationship either. If you're expecting me to bring everything while contributing nothing, I'm out. Lastly, while I'm open to different views, I find it cringy and tactless when someone is overly vocal about their politics. Life is about more than constant, mindless tribalism. Story 15. Any version of if you can't handle me when I am being a shit, then you don't deserve me when I am being a slightly lesser shit is a big no for me. You're right. I'm out. Story 16. Dishonesty. Gossiping about you behind your back, mistreating others without cause, and putting on a fake persona are all major red flags. Genuine relationships are built on trust, kindness, and authenticity. So when someone is deceitful, talks behind your back, or is needlessly mean to others, it's a clear sign they lack respect and integrity. Story 17. If someone is overly self-centered, can't take a joke or laugh at themselves, and is constantly focused on social media for validation, it's a major turnoff. Confidence is great, but there's a big difference between healthy self-assurance and being obsessed with appearances. I'm looking for someone who doesn't base their self-worth on likes or followers, and who can keep things lighthearted without needing constant affirmation. A genuine, down-to-earth personality is so much more appealing than someone who's just chasing popularity online. Story 18. If they don't allow you to have time to yourself, constantly needing your attention and involvement in everything they do, it feels as though their entire life revolves around you, and the pressure to always be there for them becomes overwhelming. Their dependence on you reaches a point where it suffocates your personal space and individuality, leaving you no room to breathe or focus on your own needs and interests. Instead of supporting each other's growth, they create an environment where you're expected to prioritize them above everything else, which can eventually strain the relationship. To add on, if a partner tries to control your relationships with friends and family, or doesn't allow you to exist as your own person, calling it a red flag is an understatement. You should have the freedom to occasionally do things without your partner, maintain private thoughts and spaces, and continue to nurture existing relationships or build new ones. A healthy relationship should never demand total control over your individuality. I once dated someone who was so controlling, they insisted on how I should sleep and got upset if I tried to change position for comfort. Not surprisingly, that also came with emotional abuse and manipulation. Story 19. Handles problems poorly by becoming either overly demanding or withdrawing into themselves. This kind of response only adds to the stress rather than helping to resolve the issue. I need someone who can stay calm and level-headed during tough situations, as life is full of challenges, both big and small. Whether it's personal struggles, relationship hurdles, or unexpected crises, having a partner who can work through problems with a clear mind and constructive attitude is essential. It takes two to face life's difficulties and overcome them together, and that requires a strong, composed partner who is ready to tackle challenges head-on, not one who lets emotions take over. Story 20. I make a point to avoid gossipers. That constant, judgmental, and complaining attitude they have towards other people is a clear sign of how they view the world. Over time, it becomes evident that this behavior isn't just something they do occasionally. It's who they are at their core. Eventually, that same negativity and criticism will be directed at you too, and you'll find yourself dealing with the same constant discontent and judgment. If they can't show empathy or understanding towards others, it's only a matter of time before that mindset starts to affect your relationship as well. Story 21. Taking no accountability. In fact, they have no sense of responsibility for their actions at all. It's more common than you might think. The last two women I was with ended up cheating on me, and looking back, I should have seen it coming based on their behavior over the years. When I'd bring up issues, I'd hear things like, "Why is this such a big deal to you?" Or, "I didn't disrespect you. Just because you feel that way doesn't mean I was wrong. And I'm not the bad guy. Why are you trying to make me feel guilty?" This usually happened after some minor misunderstanding, but their refusal to compromise, empathize, or even humble themselves was a huge red flag. On that flag, you'd see the words, "I've had people clean up my messes since I was a child. I'll never apologize," and you'll slowly start to feel more and more worthless as my partner. It's emotionally and mentally draining, not to mention physically exhausting. Story 22. Toxic behavior in general is a huge turnoff for me. One of the biggest issues is when someone tries to pressure me into doing something I'm not comfortable with or don't want to do. That kind of manipulation is unacceptable. I place a high value on honesty and transparency in any relationship, so when there's any form of manipulation, passive aggressiveness, or hidden agendas, it crosses a major line for me. It's exhausting, draining, and ultimately undermines trust. I believe a healthy relationship is built on mutual respect, clear communication, and understanding, and I won't tolerate anything that goes against that foundation. Story 23. If she starts trying to test my patience or see how much she can manipulate me, that's an immediate deal breaker. It shows she's not in the relationship for genuine connection or mutual respect. Instead, she's more focused on finding ways to exploit me, pushing boundaries to see how much she can get away with. It's a red flag that she's willing to be with someone only if she can control or take advantage of them in some way, regardless of whether she succeeds with me or not. If I sense she's more interested in using someone for her benefit than in building something healthy and equal, then it's clear that we're not on the same page, and I'm out. A relationship built on manipulation is never going to work, and I'm not here to be anyone's pawn. Story 24. Playing games, being dishonest, and having a noticeable disparity between what they expect from you versus what they're actually willing to put into the relationship. It's frustrating when someone demands a lot from you, whether it's time, effort, or emotional energy, but isn't willing to give the same in return. A healthy relationship should be a two-way street, where both partners contribute equally and are honest with each other. When someone is playing games or not holding themselves accountable, it creates an imbalance that leads to frustration and resentment. It's not just about what they want. It's about the effort and trust they're willing to invest in making things work. Story 25. If she has anger issues, it can escalate quickly and get really intense, sometimes even dangerous. When someone struggles to control their temper, it doesn't just affect the situation at hand. It can cause serious emotional harm and make you feel unsafe. I've learned this the hard way, and it's something you can't ignore. People with unchecked anger can lash out in ways that leave lasting damage, whether it's through verbal attacks or more. It's important to recognize these signs early, because no matter how much you care about someone, a relationship rooted in instability and fear is never healthy. Story 26. If someone is really into astrology and begins to blame their bad behavior on star alignments or planetary positions, that's a huge red flag. It shows they're not taking responsibility for their actions. We all have challenges and imperfections, but using astrology as a scapegoat for poor choices or behavior is a way of avoiding accountability. We're not sailing through life based on the whims of the stars. We're supposed to be navigating our own paths, making decisions based on maturity, self-awareness, and personal growth. Relying on astrology to explain away every flaw or mistake is an immature way of avoiding the hard work of self-reflection and taking responsibility for how we treat others. We are navigating life, not the seven frigging C's. Story 27. For me, it's a major turnoff if someone is attractive but lacks depth or intelligence. Physical beauty can only go so far if there's no substance behind it. Equally, if someone has a habit of backstabbing or talking badly about others just to boost their own ego, that shows a lack of character and integrity, and that's a huge red flag. But the absolute deal breaker for me is when a woman has zero independence, when she constantly clings to her parents, partner, or anyone else for everything. It's important to me that a person can stand on their own 2 feet, make their own decisions, and navigate life with confidence. A healthy relationship thrives on mutual respect and independence, not dependency or someone relying on others for emotional or financial support all the time. Story 28. I recently started seeing a girl I was really into. She was not only attractive, but also amazing in bed. However, there was something about the story she told me about her life that didn't sit right, and looking back, I realized there was a red flag I chose to ignore. It turns out much of what she told me about herself was a lie, even the small details that didn't make any sense to fabricate. I began to suspect she might be a compulsive liar. We weren't exclusive or in a serious relationship, just casually dating, so there wasn't anything to officially break up. Eventually, I just stopped reaching out and cut ties. I guess the bottom line is that if a girl can't seem to be honest, that's a deal breaker for me. Story 29. Quieting people through subtle physical actions, like lightly hitting them, is a major red flag. Things like the accidental backhand, pulling someone's arm, or repeatedly slamming your hand on the table while they're speaking are all tactics that disrupt the flow of conversation and silence the other person. Over time, this kind of behavior creates a pattern where the other partner feels like they can't speak up or share their thoughts. Eventually, they're left feeling shut down and ignored. Additionally, anyone who thinks that the loudest person in the room should automatically get their way is a major problem. That mindset breeds control and disrespect, and it's not something I'd tolerate in a relationship. Story 30. A reactive attitude is a huge turnoff for me. I need someone who takes initiative, has their own opinions, and works toward their goals. If you're just sitting around waiting for life to happen or for things to change without putting in any effort, I really can't be bothered. I need someone who's active in shaping their own future, not passively letting life pass them by. Story 31. Back in high school, I was really into this girl, and we spent a lot of time together. Things were starting to get pretty close to becoming a full-blown relationship. One day, while we were driving to the mall and talking, she casually mentioned that her dad had told her if she ever brought a black guy home, he'd disown her. She even said that she'd tell her future kids the same thing. In that moment, I completely lost interest in her. It was a deal breaker for me. Now, she's married with kids, but I haven't thought twice about her since. Story 32. If someone has sexist expectations when it comes to men, that's a major red flag for me. For example, acting like it's gross or unmasculine for men to be bisexual while being by themselves, or expecting emotional support, reassurance, and compliments, but then turning it around and making you feel less of a man for needing the same. It's also a problem if they believe there are man jobs and woman jobs with no room for equality or flexibility. And if they judge you for being vulnerable or showing any weaknesses, that's just a deal breaker. I'm not going to live in a box to meet your narrow, rigid idea of what a man should be, no matter how attractive you are. Story 33. Lack of reciprocity is a huge issue for me, and it goes beyond just compliments or favors. This extends to physical affection, emotional support, financial contributions, and even general effort in maintaining the relationship. Yes, I believe there are times when a man should take the lead in certain areas, whether it's planning dates, making decisions, or initiating physical intimacy. But eventually, it's important for the woman to meet him halfway. Relationships aren't one-sided, and both partners should feel like they're investing and receiving in equal measure. Men have feelings, too, and we like to feel loved, appreciated, and validated just as much as women do. When a woman doesn't reciprocate, it tells me that she might be selfish, or worse, that she's not truly invested in the relationship. It feels one-sided, and it starts to erode the emotional connection because it shows a lack of effort, care, or respect for the other person's needs. A healthy relationship is built on mutual respect and mutual effort, and when one partner consistently fails to reciprocate, it makes me question how much they value the connection. Story 34. If someone tries to cheat on their partner with me, that's a huge red flag. If you can't have an honest conversation with your current partner and end things if you're unhappy, then you're just not someone I want to be involved with. You shouldn't hold on to someone just because they serve as a safety net for you. If you're not happy in your relationship, either put in the work to fix it or walk away. Having cake and eating it too is not only dishonest, it's also incredibly unattractive. Respect for others and for yourself should come first. Story 35. If they openly and bluntly judge my friends in a negative manner, that's a major red flag for me. The way someone speaks about the people I care about says a lot about their character. If they can't respect my friendships or are quick to criticize them, it shows a lack of empathy and understanding. It's important to me that a partner values the people who are important in my life, even if they don't necessarily get along with them. When someone passes harsh judgment without considering the full picture, it raises concerns about how they might treat me or others down the line. Respect for my social circle is a must. Story 36. A lack of compromise early on is a deal breaker for me. I've been on dates where it quickly became clear that the girl wasn't really interested in meeting me halfway or considering my perspective. At first, I tried to be patient, thinking maybe it was just a rough start or a small issue. But as time went on, it became more and more apparent that she wasn't willing to budge on anything. Initially, I gave it a chance, hoping things would improve, but within a couple of months, it always led to frustration and tension. Relationships require both people to be flexible, communicate openly, and be willing to adjust for each other. When compromise is one-sided from the beginning, it sets the tone for an unbalanced dynamic, and that's something I'm not willing to tolerate. If someone can't show a willingness to compromise early on, it's a sign that they might not be ready for a partnership built on mutual respect and cooperation. Story 37. I once dated an incredibly attractive woman, and at first, everything seemed great. But then I discovered something that completely changed my view of her. She had a whole room in her house where she allowed her 4 cats to poop on the floor instead of providing a litter box. I couldn't believe it. Not only was it unsanitary, but it also showed a complete lack of basic care and responsibility. I tried to look past it, but it was a deal breaker. When I realized that she was okay with that level of neglect, I knew I couldn't continue the relationship. It wasn't just about the cats. It was about her attitude toward cleanliness and responsibility, and that wasn't something I could ignore. Story 38. Excessive sanctimony and constant language policing can create a tense and uncomfortable environment in any conversation. While I understand that a certain level of political correctness is important, there are obviously things that shouldn't be said. It becomes draining when simply talking to someone feels like walking through a minefield. You're constantly on edge, trying to avoid saying something that might unintentionally offend them, even if it's not meant that way. What makes it even more difficult is when they seem to take offense at things you didn't even know were offensive, or when it feels like they're more focused on pointing out what's wrong with what you said rather than engaging in a meaningful conversation. It's incredibly hard to have a genuine, relaxed discussion when everything you say is scrutinized or policed, making it feel less like a conversation and more like a test you're bound to fail. Story 39. It becomes really difficult to connect with someone when they don't understand that I can't be available 24/7. My last girlfriend, for example, told me I didn't pay enough attention to her, despite the fact that I was working 2 jobs with 12-hour days. I was doing everything I could to make time for her, but it still wasn't enough. When someone can't grasp that there are other responsibilities and aspects of life outside of being on the phone together constantly day and night, it creates a lot of tension. It's hard to maintain a healthy relationship when there's no understanding of balance and personal space. Story 40. I don't necessarily need to date someone who's super intellectual. While it's nice, it's not a requirement. However, being proud of ignorance is a major turnoff for me. I want to be with someone who's curious about the world, who enjoys learning and growing. It's hard for me to connect with someone who's content with high school being the last time they really challenge themselves to expand their knowledge. I've dated some really fun, attractive women in the past, but ultimately I ended those relationships because of the strong disdain they had for anything educational or literary. It was clear that they weren't interested in broadening their horizons, and that lack of intellectual curiosity made it difficult for me to see a future with them. Story 41. It might sound a bit straightforward, but if she's not genuinely interested in me, then I'm not interested either. If she's playing hard to get, I'm out. I'm done with the games. It's surprising how many times a woman has told me she's into me, yet her actions show the complete opposite. She might say all the right things, but if she isn't making any effort or showing any real interest, I'm not sticking around for that. Story 42. Flakiness is a huge red flag for me. If someone repeatedly cancels plans or constantly reschedules without a valid reason, it shows a lack of respect for my time and effort. I understand that things come up occasionally, but if it becomes a pattern, it's a clear sign that they're not prioritizing the relationship or the time we spend together. When that happens, I'm out. I value consistency and reliability, and I can't invest my time in someone who doesn't show the same respect. Story 43. Wanting to live as if they're still single, enjoying all the freedoms that come with it, but at the same time expecting to receive all the emotional support, attention, and fulfillment that should come from being in a committed relationship. It's the desire to have the best of both worlds, maintaining the carefree, independent lifestyle of a single person while still reaping the benefits of companionship, closeness, and emotional intimacy. This kind of behavior often creates an imbalance in the relationship, as one partner is putting in the effort to build a deeper connection, while the other is essentially keeping one foot out the door, unwilling to fully invest. Story 44. When I was dating, one thing that stood out to me was how many women didn't know how to cook or clean. That may seem a bit misogynistic, but for me it was important because I enjoy cooking, cleaning, and maintaining a home. I was often surprised by how many people didn't have those skills. I'd wonder, how do you manage? Is it all takeout? To me, a potential partner should be someone who can handle basic household responsibilities, or at the very least is willing to share in maintaining a home together. Story 45. I'm not one to judge people for their beliefs, and I understand that things like astrology, crystal healing, Reiki, psychic readings, and superstitions like the evil eye can bring comfort to some. For many, these practices offer a sense of control or meaning in an unpredictable world. But for me personally, it would be difficult to date someone who is deeply invested in these kinds of mystical beliefs, especially if they seem detached from practical reality. I think what would concern me most is the lack of accountability that often comes with some of these systems. If a person relies too heavily on these practices to explain or solve problems, it can sometimes feel like they're not taking ownership of their own actions or decisions. Life doesn't always work out the way we want, but I believe it's important to take responsibility when things go wrong, rather than attributing everything to fate or unseen forces. There's also a trust issue that arises when you're with someone who seems easily swayed by things that aren't grounded in evidence or logic. It's not about being dismissive of someone's personal beliefs. It's more about wondering if I can fully trust their judgment in other areas of life if they're willing to place so much faith in things that don't have a rational basis. Ultimately, I need to be with someone who shares a similar approach to reality, who values clear communication, accountability, and a grounded perspective on the world. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.